Thank you for joining me for another episode of Journey On. I'm DJ Burr, and today my guest is my friend Ben. Ben, welcome.
Hi, DJ.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you're here. I know that you have been on your healing journey for some time now, and I have been wanting to get you on the show, and you are here. I think my listeners will benefit from your experience, strength, and hope. Tell us, how did you get here? What's your journey been like?
Thank you so much, DJ, and thank you for the work you're doing out in the world. I really appreciate this podcast. I've listened to it, and I'm just grateful that I can speak on it. In my journey, how did I get here? Well, part of the work you're doing helped me to get here. And my story around sexualized violence, sexual abuse, healing from it, it's intergenerational. And the deeper that I look at it, I think it's societal. I think that it's global. I believe the more that I do this work, which has been 30 plus years of, talking, feeling, healing, doing the hard work of healing from sexualized violence, not only in my body, in my family, in the communities that I'm in, and seeing all the ways that it manifests. It's so insidious. I think this issue of sexual abuse and how it affects so many people, and I'm seeing it as like globally. And I connect it to the pornography industry, and to the patriarchy, to the inception of this country that was founded on the rape and kidnap of, indigenous people and Black people brought over for enslavement. And so it's just, I feel like I've been brought here by all of that, ancestral trauma, and then how it manifested in my family. And then also what I wanted to say too, I'm a queer person, and I got here through my queerness too, gender non-conforming, non-binary, queer spirit. And I think that we have a lot of sexual violence and sexual abuse in our community. And so I want to talk about that too. And then, I have my story, my individual story, which involved, I am the adult child of two parents that were impacted by sexualized violence. And in my study of epigenetic trauma, which is trauma that's passed on through the genes, my mother was a survivor of sexual assault in her family lineage. And so I believe that I absorbed some of that in her womb. And then who knows what came through the grandmothers. And then my father, he's written about this in a new book he put out. He talks about his clergy victimization. He was part of sexual abuse through clergy. And then that's part of what happened to my story. And so I grew up in a home that was an alcoholic home. There was alcoholism in the home. And then I see alcoholism as an umbrella that has, there's sexualized violence, sex addiction, codependency, food addiction, all the addictions. So I kind of grew up in this home where we weren't talking about sex. We kind of stuffed our feelings around things, and there wasn't a whole lot of trust. There wasn't trust. And so my parents were survivors. They were doing the best they could with what they had, during that time era. My mom's passed on, my dad's nearing 80 now, and you just didn't talk about this stuff. So, I was also a queer kid, so I was just learning how to stuff things. And I grew up in a home that I felt was very highly sexually charged, but nobody was talking about stuff. And there was acting out going on in my home. My dad writes about it in his book. He talks about, he was acting out with affairs. He was having a lot of affairs, and I was exposed to that as a kid. So I believe the direct hands-on sexual abuse that came later for me, I was already being sexually abused just growing up in that environment of compulsive sexuality, And so when I look back to really honestly with the lens of recovery and truth, There was a family member that covertly sexually abused me when I was probably 5. It was a really creepy experience. I didn't know what it was, but it was like, it involved being exposed. It was a female actually, and I was exposed. She exposed herself to me, and it was really creepy. And she was drinking alcohol, and I had no idea what to do with it. But I just remember feeling shame. I felt this shame, and like something icky came onto me. Did not know that that was sexual abuse. It took me a long time. It's like, oh, that was sexual abuse. And then there were instances growing up in my home that were sexually abusive from my mother, you know, just around, it was, I would say it was more covert and sometimes overt with things she would say, the way she would speak, and then being exposed to pornography at a very early age, you know. I saw my dad's pornography for the first time, and then I started seeing pornography, you know, with my neighbors. And so that was a form of the sexual abuse. And then for me, what happened in my story, growing up queer, I mean, God, just having to just stuff any type of sexual expression or feeling. I was growing up in a small hick town, and experiencing oppression with that, just societally can't talk about it, can't, you know, trust myself. And all the images that I were seeing, they were like these, you know, you gotta get married and have a wife. And so, God, this was like, you know, I was coming of age in the 80s. I'm 54 now. And so I was just, you know, and then I was growing up in the Catholic Church, which it was just like, God, talk about oppressive dogma for sexuality. And I was molested the first time hands-on directly by a Catholic priest at a summer camp when I was probably 13 or 14, and didn't know it was sexual abuse, didn't know it was sexual assault, just knew that it was intense. It was like electric lightning being put into my body, and it was exciting. I felt highly aroused. I mean, here I am, a gay teen, and I'm getting touched and like massive sexual energy poured into me from an adult male who was a priest, you know, a father in power. It turned out this guy was doing it to a lot of kids at the camp. And so I just, you know, went home and didn't talk about it. I didn't know that I'd been sexually abused at summer camp. It was just like, oh, something happened. I wanted more. That was interesting. There was this part of me that wanted more, but had to stuff that. And then there was another family priest a couple years later that had been grooming me, and another family member. And he did direct hands-on sexual abuse to me starting when I was a teenager. And that went on for a couple years. And that just got really scary and confusing, and alcohol was involved with that. And of course, he told me not to tell anybody. He called it love. He said he would stop. It kept happening over and over and over again. And at the time, I didn't realize that my dad had also been abused by a Catholic priest. So, you know, my parents, God bless them, they hadn't done their recovery yet. So they couldn't see that it was happening to me. They really couldn't protect me, you know. And I told my mom before she died, I said, you did the best you could, and it was a lousy job. And she agreed. She said, yeah, same with me. Because when my mom tried to disclose her sexual abuse back in the 50s, can you imagine, in the 1950s, she was beaten and told that she had the devil in her and never talk about it again. And this was a 14-year-old girl. And that's a siren going on outside, which is a reminder I need to wind down. But so that's kind of like my story of what happened. And I was really fortunate, DJ. I got into recovery at 22 years old. And when I look back, I followed my dad into alcohol treatment after he had gone, and I disclosed to my parents what had happened. And thank God they had enough recovery on board at that point to get me help. They believed me. It's like they believed me and they got me help, and we started the healing. And my parents ended up divorcing. My mom's passed on. My dad's still alive, and And, I started my healing journey back in the day, and part of for me, what that looked like was coming out about it, really saying, okay, this happened, and really identifying it. Oh my God, I've been raped. That was rape that happened. That was sexual assault. And then, getting into therapy, getting into recovery. I had to go get treatment for my own alcoholism and drug addiction, and then start addressing my sexual compulsivity that was a result of being sexually abused, because I didn't realize how much it had wounded me. These wounds were so deep. And so that's kind of what happened. And sometimes it still happens too. I'm a trauma survivor. I still get flashbacks. And so I have to keep doing my work around it and healing, because now for me, I see my healing, it not only affects me, it affects the whole family system and the generations. And there's new kids in our family, and I don't want to pass on, I want to carry the message that there's freedom and that there's healing. I don't want to carry the mess and pass it on to the next generation, because that's what happens if we don't do our work. We pass it on. And I want to pass on love and understanding, and not, not the unease and all of the things that happen, all the ways we start responding to life as survivors, which are maladaptive coping mechanisms that create actually disconnection in unease and unrest and unkindness. And then I go through the world, as a victim. It's like everything's happening to me, and then I attract that energy and act it out again and again and again. So that's some of my story, and I think I'll stop. And what do you think?
Ben, your story is so layered. I mean, there's so many facets to your story. I mean, this must have been incredibly painful to experience as a young queer kid who had family dysfunction, who was abused by, I imagine, these fathers, these priests, right? They were father figures, right? And you trusted them, and then to be abused by them, and then to come to that realization that what had happened was abuse must have been gut-wrenching for you.
It has been gut-wrenching too, and also liberating, because, thank you for mentioning the father thing, because I realized it happened to my dad.
Yeah.
And then, my dad was the placeholder in my family for the father energy, trying to hold, the masculine principle. And then it had happened to my mom in a different way, but it had happened to my dad by priests. And then it happened to me by priests. And this just, erosion of trust connected to spirituality, and father energy.
Right.
And then the parts of me that identify as male, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a man? How can I even trust that energy in my body, that male energy in my body that was for me so connected to violence? And
Yeah.
I was going to say patriarchy.
That's what it is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just call it out, right? I think it's important to label it as the facts, right? This is what happened to you, and it is part of these dysfunctional systems that we all have to experience, right? And I really appreciate you calling out like all the intergenerational trauma that affects most people, right?
Yeah.
Through the patriarchy, the past, like slavery, right? The killing of indigenous people. I mean, all of us have been affected in some form or shape, right? And it takes so much time and energy to do this healing work,
Yeah.
right? So I wonder, like, how much of your recovery, um, how long has it taken you to be in this recovery process? What does it look like on a daily basis for you?
Thank you, DJ. That is such a good question too. And what does it look like? It looks like this: you and I in the middle of a global pandemic, a societal revolution around race, climate crises, a president who's, in my view, a sexual predator and a sex offender. What does it look like? It looks like this, like talking having exchange around it, taking care of myself, resting, getting exercise, getting nutrition, therapy. I still see a therapist. You know, I've been in therapy mostly for the past 30 years. I've had the privilege of going to 2 inpatient treatment centers. One was a sexual recovery program in 2004 because I needed more help. It's like I'd gotten to a point in my life at 36 years old that I'm like, oh my God, it's still affecting me, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd done a lot of work, but it's like, I need to do more work. So, you know, what does it look like? It looks like the weather, it changes, you know? And I had a friend, one of my mentors who helped me like the first 15 years with this stuff. He said, Ben, he was a survivor of sexual abuse too. He'd probably be on your podcast if he was alive. But he said, he goes, Ben, as long as you're still breathing, there's going to be work to do. And so, yeah, it looks, I would say it looks good. I think we look good on Zoom.
I love your decor, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes. Right. It does look good. It's hard work, right? But we can have the things that we've always wanted. We just have to work a little extra harder for them, you know? It's like me and my family and my kids, right? I've had to work really hard to be in this place, to have them, right? And it started with healing from that trauma that I experienced early on, right? And so, you know, what is something important that you have learned about yourself?
It's when we're suffering, we need to heal, and that there's never any age that's too young to know the truth, and that people aren't broken by the truth. It actually heals them. And that just because something is moral, or not moral, I want to take that back. Just because something is legal does not mean that it's morally just. And it's like, you know, if I'm following society's ideas of what's morally just, I'm in trouble. It's like what I've learned in my recovery is that I have this inner compass. I'm calling it my inner sage. I learned this from a spiritual teacher who said that your inner sage has nothing but love and appreciation for you and will guide you kindly to your next step. Because as a survivor, I felt like I lost connection to my agency and my intuition because of trauma. You know, the sexual abuse, it puts us into states of PTSD. I still have PTSD. And what I'm learning through my recovery is that I can use all of these tools that I've learned to not, well, when I'm going into it, I can use my tools to come back, connect to center, ground, sit, connect to the inner child part, and then recalibrate, and then be re-guided, because the sexual abuse is so it's so insidious. And I want to say too, living in a culture right now where I feel like we get gaslighted and victim daily, and then the Me Too movement coming out. It's like a really exciting time to be a survivor and an advocate like you are and I am out in the world. It's like using our voices to like really say no more, you know, no more. It's like the intergenerational trauma, it stops with me, and let the healing begin with me. And using my voice as an advocate out in the world, I had the great pleasure of being part of a grassroots global activist organization that helped call in sexualized violence in the Buddhist world, which was really cool, because I felt like I got to do it in the Catholic world, because I went through a lawsuit back in the 80s. I was one of the first in the city that I live in to press charges against the Archdiocese, and I went through a 2-year lawsuit that didn't bring healing, but it brought accountability, and there was some justice. And
Good.
I did get a settlement. It was barely equitable, but it helped me to pay for more therapy. And then also my dad's story is interesting too, because he was able to get be part of a lawsuit and sue the Diocese of Spokane, which actually it bankrupted the Diocese of Spokane. There were 20 men that went through this. There was this priest over there that had abused them all these kids. And so my dad wrote about it in his book. And yeah, what I've learned too is we got to use our voices. We have to use our voices. And I look at what's still unfolding, like in the Catholic Church. It just makes me sick, you know.
Still, every day there's something. You know, we're hearing about Boy Scouts, the church. I mean, these institutions, right, that we rely on, that we, you know, support, are sometimes very abusive. There's people in those institutions who are abusive. And the thing that I know from my own experience is that hurt people hurt people. I just don't believe that these folks woke up and said, I'm going to abuse a child. They probably were abused.
Yep.
And it's heartbreaking, but they still need to face accountability.
Yes. And what I learned too is that anyone can abuse a child.
Yeah.
It's like, thank God I got into recovery and got help, because I realized I was abusing my inner child, you know,
right,
when I was struggling with my early recovery stuff. And it's like, people don't understand. This is like my message too. It's so insidious in like what you're doing with your podcast, what I'm doing too, just speaking my truth. I wanted to do your podcast 2 years ago, but I was too scared. I was like, I'm not talking about this on a podcast. You know, I talk about it in other forums that are more private, but I'm like, I can't go public with this. And what I'm learning is the more we tell our truth, that we can heal and we can carry this message, and that it actually protects people when we carry the message of hope and freedom. It's like finding freedom from this, because so many people are still scared, you know, and I feel like I've been given the gift of speech to carry the message that it's possible to find freedom from being sexually abused. And the freedom for me, it's a connection to my heart and to all those parts that were harmed, and that I can help other people find that freedom too. And that it's ultimately like a spiritual healing. And, you know, if you're atheist, that's okay. And when I say spiritual, I mean, it's a new way of connecting. I can connect to myself through kindness and through compassion and strength, instead of fear and closing down and, you know, self-hate. Because as survivors, there's a lot of issues, you know, around body shame and shame around sexuality, or acting it out, or stuffing it in. It's like, I'm not going to have any sexual feelings. I'm just going to shut it all down. And coming back full circle to what you were saying, I just realized too, this thing about children. It's like protecting children. It's like not passing it on to them. And in doing our work, what I learned is that sexual abuse, the people that are going to abuse your kids are the coaches, the priests, family members. It's people in the community. It's not like sometimes it can be some stranger that comes from, you know, out in the woods and kidnaps the kid. There's that type of sexual violence. There's trafficking. But it's like, a lot of times it's people that are close. And so we need to educate ourselves and do the advocacy and know what to look for. So, you know, kids don't have to go through what we had to go through. And that's why I'm so inspired by this new generation that's like, you know, they're just talking about this shit. And it's like, we don't have to keep this secret. It's like,
we need to tell our kids. We need to warn our children about what it looks like. What's safe touch? What's you know, unsafe touch, right? I never had that conversation. No one ever said that to me, right? You know, and, you know, just recently I found out that there were some people in my neighborhood who suspected that the man who abused me was an abuser. And my question is, why didn't anyone do anything?
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Silence does not help. It harms.
Yes, just like me. I found out too, JJ, the priest that molested me, he had molested many in the Catholic Church. Well, there were over 80 that he had gotten a hold of. And I was one of many. And they had just covered it up. They're like, you know, and so, yeah, it's like speaking the truth. And one thing I want to say too, what I've learned, I'm learning about forgiveness too, because the first priest died that victimized me, and I actually got to do a reconciliation with him and forgive him, the one at summer camp. I
Wow.
counted that as very impactful, what happened with him, but then I also felt like it was a second priest that really did, because it went on for 2 years. That was the one that really like intensely affected me. The second priest is still alive. He's in his 90s. I haven't seen him in 30 years. The last time I saw him was at the during the lawsuit. It was really creepy. And, you know, the lawsuit was rough because I was also coming out as a young, at that time, I was calling myself a gay man. And, and believe it or not, you know, the lawyers, they were trying to victim blame me. I was gaslit, you know, it's like, no, that didn't happen. Well, you were gay, you probably wanted it. There was
Oh,
involved. And yeah, I mean, I was dealing with that back in the 80s, that type of bullshit. And thank God I won the civil suit. I would have probably, the fact that I was 18 when the direct hands-on started, it made it civil. I'm surprised he didn't go to prison for rape, but you know, justice is not always just, as we know,
right. I know it.
especially for people from marginalized communities. And I look back and I see what a miracle it was. It is a young queer person in the 80s with white privilege. They listened to my voice, you know, and I felt like I used my privilege and my recovery to try to stop it, because I know a lot of people, you know, and the abusers, they prey on they prey on people that are marginalized, you know, queer
And
people
vulnerable.
and vulnerable, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Hmm.
what I learned, the second priest, he's still alive, and bless him and heal me. I just recently have done a bunch of work with actually a Zen priest who's helping me to heal from that abuse. And I wrote him a letter. It's a beautiful long letter, and I'm doing this. I didn't send it, but I'm just doing more work because I don't want to be linked to him with resentment or anger. It's like he was probably molested himself, and then he
Yeah.
molested a bunch of others, and I do not want to be bonded to him by anger or resentment. And so it's
Hmm.
forgiveness. I'm learning about forgiveness. And someone told me, a spiritual director who I love, she said, it just means letting go. You're letting go. It's like the story doesn't have its hands around my neck anymore like it used to. And I
Right.
still get triggered. I mean, I still get triggered, but I have all these tools and these resources, spiritual resources. And when I say spiritual, I mean connective resources. You know, I'm in a community. I have friends. I have a therapist. I practice meditation. I do Tai Chi. I like to sing. And I have all these ways to heal and help other people to heal, because
Mm.
I think that sexual abuse is a global epidemic. I really do. In the people I work with, I have training in contemplative psychology and also recovery. The people I work with are coming in off of online streaming porn addiction, and what's happening to the minds and the spirits of our young people through porn,
No.
and how accessible it is in the homes. I'm like, I'm learning that we got to protect the kids,
We got
and
to protect
parents,
the kids.
yeah, parents need to get educated. And I mean, that's a whole other podcast.
It
Hopefully
is.
Stacy Strout will come along and talk about that.
Well, Ben, there's a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. So you're a spiritual person and you grew up in religion.
Yeah.
How did, what is that like? Would you consider yourself still religious? Did you transition from religion to spirituality? What's the difference for you?
The difference, I think of the word religion, it's about bringing things together. And religion in its true sense could be kindness. It could be my daily life. It could be just unstructured. It could be nature. So it's like, how do I look at religion? Organized religion, the Christian teachings are truly beautiful. They're about compassion and love. But the organizations of religions are toxic. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. And so, you know, that's why I like more, when I think of spiritual, I think of like connection. It's like, how am I connecting? So I do religious practices in a different faith now, but it's like, I see religion, organized religion can get toxic. Spirituality to me is more like free, it's open. And spirituality could be how I'm connecting to, like, say, some type of a religious practice. And, you know, I'm still Catholic. What I realized, it's like, I've taken Buddhist vows in another lineage, but there's still a part of me that's always going to be a Catholic. And I had to spend a lot of time up at the Catholic Church because I had so much rage and resentment against men and patriarchy that was blocking an authentic spiritual connection. And part of my work was going back to the Catholic Church, working with priests up there, working with a spiritual director, so I could actually hear the true message of Jesus, which wasn't about, you know, he was a radical revolutionary, he was a black man. It's like, you know, and connect with that true spirit of Jesus and realize, oh, I just got sidetracked by some confused priests. And then right now I've been practicing Zen Buddhism, which is kind of weird for me because it just kind of strips that all away. And it's just connecting with my direct experience of God, you know, the unknown, universal, unknowing. It's like, I don't know anymore. And so spirituality, it's like, I feel like I'm connecting, you know, and I don't need a church or a, you know, I need guides, I need mentors, but it's like, I'm connected to my inner sage.
Right.
My
Right. That's
intuition.
important. That, you know, being able to learn how to trust yourself again is so important. And what I'm hearing about this spiritual place that you're in is that you get to decide what you incorporate into it, right? It's not forced upon you. You have options. And like you said, you're still Catholic. You still identify as Catholic, right? I think that's pretty beautiful, right? You can still identify with the faith that you were brought up in, and even though you're maybe not practicing in those institutions, you can still claim that, you know, and use that as part of your healing. And so I think that's beautiful. So nice.
Thank you. Catholic means universal too. It's like universal, and there's a saying in recovery circles, they say, we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. And it's like, I got a whole lot of crap from Catholicism, but I got a lot of good too. And I realized, you know, the church, the patriarchal church is still really sick, but there's people in it that are really good and loving and kind, and they're working to change it. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to give the Catholic Church money and be part of, you know, be part of like a Catholic faith community. But I did try to do outreach here in Seattle with one of the Catholic churches around healing and sexual abuse, but it was clamped down. They were too scared, I think, to have a survivor come in and do something. But who knows? I'm open. I have this vision of doing a retreat supported by the Archdiocese of Seattle for people who've been abused by Catholic priests. A retreat led by survivors too.
Yes, that would be huge.
Yeah, and I was talking to my mentor up at St. James Cathedral, and she said, you better go to the Jesuits for that, because they're not going to do that at the cathedral. The Jesuits are kind of the progressive order of the church. And so we'll see, you know, but I keep my expectations low because it's it'd be hard to have a retreat right now. We could do it on Zoom.
You could do it on Zoom. So Ben, the last question I have for you, and I'm bringing this up because you've mentioned it a couple times. You've mentioned your privilege. Explain, if you can, to our audience how your privilege has affected your recovery. Like, what did your privilege allow you to do in terms of your healing?
Thank you. When I think of my privilege, I think of my white privilege, just having white skin. I think of the economic privilege, even though I've lived, like, I would be considered, like, my economic bracket is like poor. But how has my privilege helped my recovery? I think I've had more access to, white people do have more access to mental health resources, to healing, to treatment. Traditionally, white voices are believed more.
That's true.
You know, it's like when a white, I was thinking in my neighborhood, when the cops come, they listen to a white person's voice instead of like a person of color. So like, there's so many aspects to privilege, but my privilege has helped me to, I think, access resources and have more funding for my healing, you know.
Yeah.
That a woman, and I want to say too, I want to name out my privilege as a queer person. I mean, I do identify with the marginalized identity, and also being part of that community. You know, we have higher suicide rates, but then it's like, I have white privilege as a queer person and as a gender nonconforming person, because there's still, you know, the systemic racism, it's everywhere. And just because you might be a white person in a marginalized community doesn't mean that you still aren't operating with privilege. So it's like, I just see my privilege in queer communities too, you know,
Yeah.
just for having white skin. What do you think? Does that,
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered it. I appreciate that answer. You know, one of the things that I think that you really kind of just nailed for me is like access to treatment and also being heard, right? Because if you are heard, you're believed, and then you may, in my opinion, you may have more access available to you to said treatment. Right? Like I heard you mention that you had an inpatient, you were able to go to inpatient work, do inpatient work. I wish I had had that experience to be able to go to inpatient.
yes, and you look, this is what pisses me off too, DJ. I know you know this, but it's like, you look at treatment right now. Who can afford these treatment centers? It's rich white people that are getting treatment for sex abuse. You know,
it's true.
I mean, she's $30,000 to go for, you know, 5 weeks, or $10,000 for a weekend intensive. It's like,
right.
And
Who
are
that?
the resources, you know?
You know, yeah, my clients, they don't have that, you know. People are having to take out, you know, loans, retirement, all these things to be able to get healing, and it shouldn't be that expensive. But I'm glad that you called it out, that privilege can get you access to those things, right?
Right. And privilege isn't bad. It's just when it's unexamined. It's like, I have to examine it, and it's like, use my privilege as to be a voice and support people. You know, it's like, shit, okay, we'll go here, you know, connect to these organizations, because we have, you know, I think King County Sexual Assault Resource Center here in Seattle. We've got, in King County, we've got, you know, Northwest Network for Sexualized Violence with LGBT. There's a lot of resources and ways to get people connected and hooked up. The work you're doing, you know, the support groups you do. And I think of our friend Stacy Sprout and other therapists in this community that are doing the work to support survivors, because we need support. It takes a village to abuse a child. It takes a whole community to abuse a child. And it also takes a whole community to heal a child.
True.
You know, abuse happens because people start going to sleep.
Yeah, right. We need to wake
And
the fuck up.
right, everyone has a part in it, you know. It's like blame needs to go out the window because people are like, oh, we need to kill the priest. Well, the priest was a part of it, but then there's also the institution that he was involved with. There's the parents that were checked out that didn't thinking, oh, everything's fine in our family. We're just, you know, that couldn't happen here. And that's what's been so healing about my dad's book, because he's finally owning, you know, he's almost 80 now at the end of his life. And he finally owns the fact that he didn't do his work, then it was passed on.
Right.
It happened to me, and good on him. I mean, good on him, because it's like, it didn't have to happen. Well, it did have to happen in my family the way it happened, but I know for me, one day at a time, I am not passing it on to the next generation, because I have nieces and nephews who I love, and I'm teaching them too.
Amen.
You know, my 10-year-old nephew, he knows you don't, you know, if anyone touches you, you know, you say no, you tell an adult. You know, we're having the conversations. We're having the conversations about queerness. He knows I'm queer.
Good. He should, right? No secret.
Yeah.
Right?
No secrets.
Awesome.
No secrets.
Yes. We don't need any secrets. So
tell
Ben,
the truth, tell it faster. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, I love that. I wonder, would your dad mind if you shared the name of his book and where folks could access it? Because he talks about his survivor experience, right?
He does. My dad's book is on Amazon. Well, here, look, I'll give him a plug. Hold on.
You have it. You have a copy there?
I do. My dad's book is called Tears and Triumphs, and it's called Tales of Loyalty and Betrayal from a Military Life, and it's by John R. Black, and you can find it on Amazon. And I will give him a plug. I mean, this book is about so much more than sexualized violence. It's about the Vietnam War. It's about my dad's story of being abused by a priest. He mentions a little bit about what happened to me, and he's inspired me. I want to write my own book, because it's like,
you should.
He touches on it, and you've inspired me because you wrote your book, and others. But it's like, he does talk about it, and good on him, because it's like, it's miraculous that my dad came out about it, because I'd known it had happened to him, but we'd never really talked about it, you know, because I mean, how do you talk about this stuff in your family? It's still hard. When I told some of my family members that I was doing this interview, one of them was like, why would you do that? Why would you talk about it? And I just said, because, you know.
Right, because you want to stay in your healing place.
Right, and my dad's still been gaslit by family members too, who won't believe what happened in his book. They're like, that didn't happen. And I'm like, really? You think he just wrote that for fun, you know?
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
I'm so sorry to hear that. But what I'm happy about is that you're here, you're sharing, you're open, and you're healing, right? And your story is going to help so many other folks understand their own experiences and recognize that they too can get help and they too can move forward. So I want to thank you, Ben, for being here, being always a supporter and a friend. And I think that so many people are going to benefit from hearing your experience, strength, and hope. So thank you.
Zoom hands.
Thank you, Ben, and come back anytime.
Awesome. We'll do another segment and talk about something else.
Something else.
Hey, bye-bye.
All right, Ben. Nice.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done.
Do you think we got something?
Oh, yeah. We got plenty.
Good. You know what's funny, DJ? I always feel like, you know, there's this idea of how you think you're going to come across. And I was like, I'm going to be all zen and quiet.
Why would that even be the case?
I don't know.
That's not how I see you. You're zen and quiet. You're your own unique self. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. I can't wait. When's it coming out?
When I get a moment to edit.
Oh, cool. And you'll send me a link?
Yeah. I have many episodes to edit and get prepared. I'm in the middle of writing a movie. I'm running my practice. You
I
know, I
know.
got lots of stuff going on, but I'm working on it.